Attorney General, thank you very much for coming in. When we used to talk to Maura Healey when she was the Attorney General in Trump round one, she was often in the midst of doing her own suit or filing some other suit or joining another suit with other attorneys general against something the Trump administration was doing. How are you preparing for Trump round two? What are you concerned about?
Well, I've been stressing to folks, we are prepared. We're participating in a lot of contingency planning just in case, just like we always do. My job is to protect the residents of the Commonwealth and, of course, our economy as well. So number one is I want to stress that if the president-elect does things that help our residents, that address issues of affordability as he promised, help our economy, I will be right there applauding the president and, of course, working in collaboration. And then where he, like anyone else, harms our residents or our economy, we'll be there to hold him accountable. What I'm concerned about is the rhetoric, of course, especially everything related to mass deportations, and the language around that suggests that it will absolutely be an illegal operation if you round up millions of people, including those who are here lawfully, which the last I checked, we rely on an immigrant population for our healthcare industry, our higher ed industry. That will affect our economy. And of course, the basic rights of folks walking around Massachusetts who could be rounded up. It's never been something a president has ever promised or pledged to do here in this country, so we should all be concerned. I'm also concerned about the rhetoric in terms of not just the nominees to various agencies, but the lack of substance, the loyalty that they have to the president. Some of these public safety agencies and law enforcement agencies should be used to promote public safety, not to go after political enemies. These are taxpayer resources that should be directed to public safety efforts, so I'm concerned about that. But at the end of the day, we're ready. We have litigation tools. We can go in court and sue the federal government if we have to. We have resources to put out to organizations to help them respond themselves. We can file legislation to fight back at the State House. And most importantly, I think this is going to become a more increasingly important role. We are a trusted authority to provide factual information, given the misinformation that's out there, which is really concerning.
You know, we talked about the mass deportation thing, which both the new president, soon-to-be president again, and this Tom Homan, who is his attack dog on this, is promised. He's trashed the mayor of Boston.
Who, by the way, today's the mayor's birthday.
And
she just had a little
kid
girl.
Yesterday, yes.
We were pregnant at the same time on the council, so congratulations to Mayor Wu. It's
Indeed.
It's a big deal.
So I'm not, on this mass deportation thing, we talked to Carol Rose from the Civil Liberties Union before. I'm not clear. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong anywhere along the way, the state cops would not assist ICE unless there's a warrant, and the same with local law enforcement. You're nodding in agreement. Okay, so no assist except in those circumstances. I'll pose the same question. It was addressed in the New York Times, in the New York Times system. An ICE agent comes to a school and says, I'm here for that kid in that classroom. What does that family do? What does that school do? What should they do to protect, or can they do anything to protect that child?
Absolutely. And so one of the things that I want to be careful on is a lot of what's out there right now is hypotheticals. We don't know what's going to happen, what they're going to do. We don't know what day one will look like in terms of the executive orders they put forward.
That's right.
Or these ideas that they have in terms of mobilizing the National Guard. I'm obviously in conversation with the governor, the administration. We're in conversation with various stakeholders, including school districts, law enforcement agencies. And if anything, we're telling our law enforcement agencies, including those federal law enforcement agencies that we work with all the time, that our job is to promote the public safety of our residents, getting guns off the street, drugs off the street. That has not slowed down. We are busier than ever before. We've built great relationships with our federal partners, and that we will not redirect federal resources or state resources to push an unlawful agenda, for example, of deporting innocent people unlawfully. If, for example, they have the proper paperwork and things have gone through proper channels legally to take someone and to deport them for some reason, fine. And I'll give you some examples. We do that already. I have a criminal bureau in my office, a state police division that works incredibly hard on a whole bunch of public safety cases. We hold folks accountable for perpetuating crimes in our communities, whether they are citizens or not. And so if someone, for example, does a crime in our community and we find they are here without the proper paperwork, they are deported. That work is undergoing. And right now you have language out there suggesting that's not happening and making it sound like it's something else.
So, but forget the criminals, where I think everybody agrees, not the crime of crossing the border, a serious crime of that you may have committed.
I don't want to forget the criminals.
No, I'm saying I think almost everybody agrees, of course, that should happen. But if someone else, so we won't deal with hypotheticals, if other people have a concern, they have fear, they have a question.
We have a good question.
Do they call you?
They can call our office. They can access our website. We have actually put resources on our website. We have, of course, promoted things on social media because we know that's where a lot of folks are. We're also connecting with community-based organizations in certain populations that have more trusted relationships to tell folks not only are we a trusted authority when it comes to their rights and what they are, and that our job is to enforce them lawfully. But one thing I do want to push on, because you said don't forget the criminals. Well, we can't forget the criminals.
I meant forget the criminals, because everybody agrees that they should be deported if they've committed serious crimes.
I agree. The thing that I'm most concerned about with the rhetoric out there and the misinformation, including after that horrific attack in New Orleans, is you have folks out there suggesting that every immigrant who is here in the United States is somehow a part of some organized crime or perpetuating crimes in communities, and making it a larger narrative that is just not true. Here in Massachusetts, we are holding those who are committing crimes accountable in my office, and at the same time working with federal law enforcement on proactive ways to keep our people safe. We take that priority very seriously. We can provide you a lot of tangible things, but at the end of the day, if you don't feel safe, what does it matter? So we take that order and mandate to protect our people very seriously, while also not demonizing those who are immigrants.
Julie from Quincy has a question about driver's licenses. She said she wants to know, what about the driver's licenses given to immigrants? Will their info be shared with ICE? This is a very worrisome situation, says Julie from Quincy.
Undocumented people we're talking about.
Yeah, Julie, thank you for the question. It's actually something we worked on when we were promulgating the regulations with advocates, so that information would not be shared unless it was under very limited circumstances, where we got a warrant or certain paperwork from a federal agency related to some crime, for example, where there was appropriate information sharing in certain circumstances. But we were mindful of this concern. We addressed it in the regulations. And we'll continue, of course, to work with the DMV and other agencies on what appropriate information sharing is and looks like.
Okay, one last question that is
Thank
clearly
you,
not a
Julie.
hypothetical, and then we'll get to more callers and people at the mic here. Needham is voting today to see if they will comply with the law. I'm going to ask you the exact same question I asked you months ago before the Supreme Judicial Court ruled in your favor and said you do have the power to enforce this law.
Yeah.
If you have the power to enforce this law, and it is mandatory, which it is, why are people permitted to vote? I'll give you the same analogy I gave you last time.
Yep, I remember.
To me, this is analogous to saying they're going to vote in Needham as to whether or not it's going to be legal to break into stores and steal stuff. Well, they don't have to do that because that's already the law. The law, the MBTA Communities Act, says you have to do this, so why do they even get to vote?
I'm not even going to go down that path because we've talked about it before.
Okay.
But what I will stress is this recent decision from the SJC is a major victory for my office, the team, the advocates, the communities that have come into compliance with the MBTA Communities Law. Makes it clear that that law is mandatory. It also makes it clear that my office has the authority to enforce it. And I'm hopeful that in Needham and other communities that are currently out of compliance will read that decision carefully. We'll work with our office as we provide technical assistance to municipalities to come into compliance. And that's my expectation. So we'll see what happens later today.
Has the governor issued promulgated the regulation?
They're working on it. It could come as early as later today.
And she says they'll be immediately effective, meaning once they're promulgated. This is the part of the SJC decision.
Where
They
they had to
ruled
go
for you
back.
on that, but they said you have to redo the regulations.
That's right. So EOHLC, Housing Livable Communities, they're redoing the regulations. They could come out as early as later today. And in those regulations, they will set a timeline of compliance for communities. So this will give communities even more time. I don't know what that timeline is. That has to be set by the agency. But that's a good thing. But let's be clear. The number one issue that people are talking about is affordability. Everything's too expensive. And let's remind folks, it is housing. number one issue. And we know that the MBTA communities law is just one tool to help address that crisis. And I hope municipalities don't take their sight off of that. This is a solution to a crisis. We don't want to lose more people who will leave Massachusetts, or I think this is a veteran who's at the mic, veterans who can't afford housing, elders who can't downsize in their community, public servants the same. So I hope municipalities will do everything they can, as we have been, and work with us to get it done.
So for my birthday in May, you'll tell me why people are allowed to vote on a law that's mandatory?
Maybe not.
Okay, are you Jerry? Jerry, can we turn on
Jerry.
the mic in the library, please?
Yes, I am, Jerry.
Hi, Jerry. The Attorney General
Hi,
is here to
Jerry.
listen to you.
First, I wanted to start by applauding your recent audit of the Early Education and Care Department, which was revealed that they weren't following their own regulations. I'd like to bring to your attention, my son is a person with developmental disabilities,
Okay.
and he's been served since he was 21, ahead of 22,
Okay.
and he's now 52. And in the
Okay.
last 5 years, we've seen numerous instances where the department doesn't follow its own regulations. I'll give you some bullet statements rather than go into the detail, but I'll leave you with the detail.
Okay.
Regarding financial mismanagement of the offsets to charges for care, it's a direct violation of Regulation 115 CMR.
Jerry, can I interrupt you? I would suggest, with your permission, that the document you give to one of the Attorney General's colleagues, but what's your question for the Attorney General?
I'd like her to audit the same agency.
Okay.
Because I'll just give you the simple headings: financial mismanagement, insurance fraud, misrepresentation of regulations.
Wow.
And the misrepresentation was a case where my son had been sexually abused in one program,
sorry to
raped
hear
in
that.
another. We
Oh.
had protective language in there. It stayed there for 12 years, and because they redid the ISP, it accidentally fell out. I tried to get it put back in, and the regional lawyer said, our regulations preclude this. I proved to them that was not the case. I got silenced. I went to the attorney's boss. She cited the anti-discrimination laws of the Commonwealth. Also not true.
I don't want this to get
So-
lost in this quick conversation. Is it okay if he hands this to... Okay.
Absolutely. One, Jerry, first of all, thank you for sharing something that is so vulnerable. I appreciate that. I can imagine the ordeal your family went through based on just the simple facts you just shared, so I'm sorry for that. Second, I assumed you were a veteran based on your hat. You are a veteran. Okay.
Veteran and retiree of 34 years.
Well, thank you for your service. And then lastly, I will meet you right over here off to the side when we wrap up to make sure we have your contact details and make sure we follow up and to take your
I just wanted to
document.
add one
course.
No
thought
problem.
for that.
Yep.
That lawyer, I pointed out to her that sexual predators are not a protected group, and that the law itself precludes individuals with mental disabilities.
Jerry, thank you
Thank you,
for
Jerry. I'll
stating
talk
your
to you-
case.
I'll
and
talk to you afterwards
The
if you
Attorney
can
General
stay.
will talk to you. 877-301-8970.
Yeah, we have a question for the Attorney General, speaking of housing.
Yeah.
This is from Jay in Chestnut Hill. Is it legal for alleged realtors and investors to text people asking if they're looking to sell their house? I've gotten several predatory cold texts intended for my elderly parents. Thank you.
Not necessarily so, but it sounds like someone is reaching out to Jay and saying,
And
I
their
want to buy
parents,
your
too,
house.
yeah.
And there's ways in which, through various technologies, to block some of that. But if it's incessant and he's worried more about his parents, he can follow up. We have an elder justice unit in the office we establish that responds to some of these
How does he get in
complaints.
touch with them?
He can either, how did he contact you? Is that a
He
text?
texted, yep.
Okay,
texted.
so if he wants to just call 617-727-8400.
Okay.
And then just reference, he texted into the AG's office what it is, and he can be connected to our Elder Justice Unit, which is run by Mary and the team, and go from there.
And tell them that the Attorney General said that you should do that, by the way.
617
Absolutely, Jay, yes.
727-8400.
That's right.
Okay.
And just so people
sorry.
know, that's our general consumer hotline, so you can call with anything to that hotline.
Dave in Hanover, you're on with the Attorney General, Andrea
Dave.
Joy Campbell. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, Attorney General. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Dave.
I have a family member who was recently suspended by Lyft after receiving a bad review. He had done like 1,600 rides this year, had a top rating,
Wow.
and there's no real appeal process. They send you an email in the morning saying you've been suspended. They give you an opportunity to send an email back, and within hours he was permanently deleted.
Okay.
I heard on the promo for the show this morning you were speaking about this topic, and
Yes.
you said it was one of the key things in your settlement with Uber and Lyft. And I'm wondering if you could just elaborate on that and maybe steer me in the right direction to see what kind of recourse there might be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. So if your relative could follow up, he can call the same, he could either go online to file an actual complaint, or he can just call 617-727-8400 and reference this radio program and particularly Lyft and be connected to the appropriate team member. Yes, that was the number one issue that we heard from drivers, is that if they had great records, they could be deactivated without any reason. And so in the settlement, we required Uber and Lyft to not only provide actual notification and rationale as to why they were being deactivated, but also an appeal process. And we've heard from a few drivers that may not, that process either is not happening or they are not going through it. So if he could follow up, we can connect with him and go from there.
Dave, good luck to you. You know,
Thank you,
when
Dave.
Jerry was speaking, he talked about an audit of the department that he thinks is not treating his son
Mm-hmm.
responsibly and fairly. The auditor of the Commonwealth, Diana DeZoglio, championed a ballot question, which we talked
Yeah.
about, which won a mere 72%
That's right.
support from the electorate. You said to us and others, after you said it complied with, I think, Article 48 of the Constitution, so it could be on the ballot, there still may be other constitutional issues. She has said to the legislative leaders, I'm ready to go. Here are some of the areas, non-disclosure agreements, procurement policies, that sort of thing. You continue to say there still may be constitutional issues. Why don't you say what your concerns are so that the auditor and the 72% who voted for this are on notice of what may be at risk, what she can do according to you, and what she can't do according to you?
So it's a great question. So number one is fully support the value statement and what the auditor is saying. We need a legislature that is more transparent, more open, all the things she has described. Absolutely agree. We think about the public records law, what agencies and branches of government are exempt from that. That has to change.
Would you support
I agree with
the
that.
governor said she would support, with certain exceptions, the elimination of the exemption of public. We're the only state in the country, every branch of government says it's exempt. Would you support ending the exemptions?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
I've been on the record for
Okay,
years related
continue.
to that.
I'm sorry.
So I fully agree
Okay.
with that. I agree with the voters. The challenge and what has been difficult, and actually I would say frustrating at moments, and I'll say this in a loving way to my sister in service, the auditor, that we have process. So I can't, for example, initiate a lawsuit because you sent me something via social media or press release. So when we finally got the letter from the auditor requesting that we get involved, at that
Representing
time...
her.
Representing her.
Yeah.
We said we could not because there was no legal dispute at issue. At that time, it was a back and forth between the legislature, which is still ongoing, and her waiting to get a response from both branches of government in terms of what they would respond with, and also the details of what she wanted her audit to be. That wasn't crystal clear. We have a process. Since then, she has sent us a letter. We are reviewing that. And at the same time, we have to have conversations with the legislature to figure out, well, what is it they want to send? Why I say that is because we have a process to determine when we represent an agency. We do the same for the governor or anybody else. Sometimes we say yes, sometimes we say no, depending on a process and evaluation. That I will come back once we are there. The other thing I want to stress is before the ballot question, which I fully supported.
Did you vote for it?
Yes, I did.
Okay, okay.
But before the ballot question conversation, obviously she was looking to audit the legislature. And in that request was very expansive. And in my response to her, I said, you cannot do that based on our Constitution. If it was just financial records or something limited, yes. But based on the history of laws and legislative history, you name it, we laid it out in that long letter, you do not have the ability to go much farther than that. So what we're looking at now is what is it the auditor wants specifically from the legislature? How are they going to respond? Once that is finalized and there is a dispute, we then have to do an analysis on who we will represent. And I will
Okay.
say we are going to do that thoughtfully, because it is not the norm that you have one branch of government suing another branch of government. So just like we were thoughtful when we put that letter out, and I told the auditor, my sister in service, it is not personal. When I denied that request initially, some folks weren't happy about it. And it's because whether I like it or not, my job is to enforce the laws as they exist. There are some laws I'd like to change.
Okay, so you just said a minute ago, there's certain things that you may choose to audit that are not constitutionally permissible. There's certain things you may choose to that are permissible. Two things that she's mentioned in this letter to the legislature is looking at non-disclosure agreements and procurement policies. Are they permissible under the Constitution?
I'm not going to go into detail because that's a part of our current analysis based on exactly what she wants and exactly what the Senate and the House is willing to respond with. have not been in the weeds. I think the Senate just sent out a correspondence or something, maybe today or last night, that they would be willing to maybe comply. I have no idea what comply with what and comply with releasing what. That's where we are. And I'm going to just stress this because it is on social media, it is out in the world, and there is some misinformation around it. And I am somehow in the center of it. And I want to be crystal clear. I am for transparency in government. Our office operates as such, and we promote and want greater transparency in our legislature and other parts of government, hence why I think certain laws should be changed. But my job is to enforce the laws as they exist and to only get involved when there is actually a legal dispute. When we are there and we have an opportunity to go through a process, we will make a decision. And we will do that thoughtfully.
But you know what's weird to me is say the cops do something bad and someone gets hurt and there's a lawsuit and they have to pay, the city of Boston has to pay $1 million. We find out about that. They're doing these non-disclosures up at the State House, and DiZoglio was involved in one when she was working up there as an aide, and paying off who knows whom for who knows what, with taxpayer dollars. So I don't understand, especially since there were no non-disclosures when the Constitution was written, I don't understand really why they're entitled to do that with taxpayer dollars and nobody knows about it.
Well, we have divisions in our office, including our false claims division, where their entire portfolio of work in many ways is to shepherd and steward taxpayer dollars.
Right.
Is to hold companies accountable that take our money and don't deliver the product and service to us as they describe, or to look at our own agencies, the same thing. We do that work. These are apples and oranges as far as I'm concerned. My position on non-disclosures and transparency is very different on whether or not right now as I stand here, there is a legal dispute between two branches of government that is right for me to get involved with. I have a request that we have to review, but let me tell you, I had requests before then that didn't necessarily come to our office, came to others, where it was not right for lawsuit at that time, because either the law hadn't gone into effect yet, there wasn't a dispute, we hadn't actually heard what the response was from the legislature. So while I may be put in the middle by some, we take our job seriously. I take my job seriously. You know, I say we because it's my team too. And that when appropriate, we will get involved where necessary, and when appropriate, to get involved.
Let's go to Brian, who's at the mic at the library as well. Brian, welcome
Hi,
to
Brian.
the show.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, Brian.
So it's no surprise, but the Trump and the Republicans in Congress are heavily supported by the oil and gas industry. There's probably going to be a lot of executive orders about that day one, supporting that and furthering the development of it. How do we go about, getting a moratorium or stopping the development of natural gas infrastructure in the support of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in doing that in our state and supporting the cities and towns that want to go all electric? Because that electric is our future here in Massachusetts. So how do we support and stop the development of gas infrastructure?
Thank you, Brian, for the question. You're exactly right. We're gearing up for a whole host of executive orders that will likely not necessarily go with the way in which we want to proceed on a whole bunch of issues, including environmental issues. We are, obviously, various municipalities are doing things at the local level in response to your question. Where we see our role is to, one, work with other AGs across the country on the goals that you described. And we're prepared and gearing up to respond to any executive order that comes from the administration that would stand in the way for some of our climate goals. So that's number one. We don't know what's going to come just yet, but we shall see. The second is we have to work with the administration on some of this, right? It is a transition, whether to even all electricity. And it also will cost people, including ratepayers, some who may not even be paying attention to these issues more than others. So making sure these costs are reasonable, this transition is reasonable and fair. We have a whole division that is tackling this issue as we speak. Hopefully, working towards the goal that you just described, but doing it in a way that folks can afford it. It is our long-term goal, as you described, but it is still work that we have to do. I have no idea what the Trump administration is going to do, but we're prepared. If it may be a legislative solution working with the governor in the next few years, it may be a litigation solution working with our AGs across the country. It may be some local municipality continued support and work around things within their communities. It's a whole host of solutions we look to address, and we're ready. We share the same goals. Our biggest concern is as we make this transition, that it's not on the backs of ratepayers and consumers.
Thank you for your question. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for being here.
Before we take a break, you talked about transparency. I want to talk about what I consider to be lack of transparency. You told us months ago.
You just seem upset today.
I am upset today. Not with you, the state of the world, or whatever.
Yeah. He's upset a lot.
Okay, Marjorie, that's between us. Now, Attorney General, you told us months and months ago you supported a ban on third-party energy suppliers. Subsequently, the governor has said she supports it. The mayor supports it, Mayor of Boston. Hundreds of organizations support it. It didn't become law. And apparently, in brilliant reporting, I should say, by the Boston Globe, and one of the people doing the reporting, Samantha Gross, will be with us tomorrow, it turns out that the chair of the House committee who is engaged in this, whose committee stopped it from becoming law, has been in a multi-year relationship with a lobbyist, one of whose clients is one of the largest third-party energy suppliers in the country, who actively opposed this law. Their contention, Representative Jeff Roy, is I'm fully compliant with law. I filed with the House clerk a statement in July of 2023 disclosing he was in a relationship with a lobbyist. His ex-wife says that happened long before that, and had the Globe not investigated, wouldn't have known about that. What's your reaction to this lead person helping to kill a proposal all three of you and others supported when he's in a relationship with one of the chief lobbyists for the other side?
Well, I don't want to speak to Chairman Roy's relationships or whatever else, or what informed what he did or didn't do. What I know and what my priority is to continue to get out here, including in this new legislative session, to get a bill passed in the legislature that would end the individual residential competitive electric supply market. And talk about, to Brian's point, we want to move towards that electricity. At the same time, we have an industry that is preying upon, and in many ways using deceptive marketing tactics, preying upon households, usually low-income households, even certain communities, for their products that are not saving them any money. We're going to be releasing another report very soon through the same ratepayer division, looking at more substantial losses for folks who are relying on the competitive electric supply market. And if they actually stayed with basics, their basic ratepayer, they would have saved money, which is unfortunate. And so this report will speak to more losses. And of course, these losses are in the millions, and they're not going to slow down. And so while we can hold them accountable by filing lawsuits, what we have found, and even when I put this in quotes, win, they can file for bankruptcy, and these households are left, of course, with no restitution, no protection. We need a legislative fix. And we think this fix is reasonable. It doesn't take away their commercial clients or even some other possibilities of them serving certain types of institutions when it's bulk purchasing. But when it comes to these individual residential communities, mainly low-income communities, rural communities, poor communities, people of color living in certain communities, this legislative fix needs to happen. That's my position. I don't know why people do the things they do in the state house.
Let me put it another way, if I can. If you don't
I'm not going to speak to that.
Well, okay, I'm not asking you to speak to the motivation.
But can I just end with this?
No, are you, in a second, if you may, are you comfortable with the key decision maker on this issue having a relationship with one of the key lobbyists for the opposition? Isn't that at least an appearance of a problem to the taxpayers of Massachusetts and to you?
You can share that opinion. it's not about my comfortability. Am I comfortable in my job? I love my job.
You comfortable with that?
I have no, what I'm uncomfortable by is we are pushing for a legislative solution, and if we don't get it, we know more communities will suffer millions of losses.
Right, but you're not
so
gonna get it.
Well, I hope that people mobilize then and push their legislature, push their representatives to do what's right. I know I am. I'm showing up at the State House personally. I'm advocating. I'm pushing. We want folks who are losing these millions of dollars to also push.
Okay, last one. Last hypothetical, and then we'll take a break.
I know, because
Should
they're
there-
so
Obvious people
upset.
should recuse themselves.
Exactly.
He
Should they
recuse
not-
himself
forget this guy.
As legislators
Should
recuse
legislators-
themselves from areas
How
in which
about
they
that
have
question?
financial.
I do think if you lack some objectivity in terms, and you have significant relationship of some sort that it would interfere with your ability to make a judgment that is objective, you should consider recusing yourself. Yes,
Fine.
I would have to do the same thing based on any relationships I have. And actually, sometimes I don't, because I know even if a donor or someone supports me, and I will call that donor and say respectfully, love ya, but we're still suing you because I'm not accountable to donors. I'm accountable to the people that put me here. And so sometimes we need the people to remind the people that are in these elected positions who put them there. So I'm here not to go into what he did and all that. Chairman Roy and I have done some other great work together, and I want to acknowledge that, including on wrongful convictions. We're talking about some meaningful
His
reform
girlfriend
there.
wasn't lobbying on the other side
My
of that.
biggest, okay, God bless you. My biggest thing is just to make sure they know the facts, which is why this piece of legislation will continue to be a priority for our office, because if we don't fix it legislatively, literally as we stand here and going into this winter season, millions of constituents here in Massachusetts are losing millions of dollars to an industry that if we don't hold them accountable, nobody will.
You're a better person than I, but everybody
I
knows
pray a
it.
lot.
Everybody knows that already. We got to take a break.
Well, this is another opportunity for citizens to complain about this because clearly
Agree.
this representative should not be voting on something that impacts him as directly as this
And
does.
I will just add, it's important to know, and I've said this to the folks during hearings, these folks who are running the competitive electric supply industry, these companies, we're not saying your existing customers or those who are doing well or even past, keep all that. This bill says we're banning your ability to bring in new customers because we know you are not saving them. So we have been reasonable and responsive, and we're not banning their commercial market because that's going exceptionally well. But poor people who are already struggling, elders, folks in our rural communities, what about them? And so we're going to keep fighting for them. And I would often say the people that are often left out and forgotten.
We're going to take a break.
We're going to take a break. But how come you moved to Dartmouth? You left us and moved down to the South Coast, as they call it, between the two gateway cities of Fall River and New Bedford.
And New Bedford.
My old neighborhood. So how come you moved down there?
What I will say was bittersweet.
Yeah.
You know, I'm born and raised in Boston. My father was born and raised in Boston before me. I love Mattapan. I still have family, of course. The parents are still in Mattapan. But it was time for something different for the kids and the
Yeah.
family. My husband's originally from Vermont. Sometimes you just try something different. And so far, it's been wonderful. We have a regional office in New Bedford. And I would say Bristol County, Fall River, New Bedford, talk about communities that feel left out and left behind.
Yeah.
And so if I can bring some attention to the sort of this geographical equity issue, I will. The boys have transitioned well to Dartmouth Public Schools, and that has been amazing. It's not easy moving a family and a lot of stuff, mostly my husband's stuff. He carries a lot of stuff. But it was bittersweet, but it's amazing. And it has just been, people have been so welcoming, so warm, especially our neighbors, and it means the world.
So you obviously know a lot about Dartmouth. Here's a quick question for you before the break. What is the
I
name?
don't necessarily know a lot.
What
I'm
is
learning.
the name of the public figure who received an honorary degree from UMass Dartmouth
Oh,
Law
gosh.
School, and a week after she got it, the law school closed?
That is a good question. Who, Jim?
That'd be Marjorie Egan.
That's
That'd
right.
be Marjorie Egan.
And you know what? This is good because it brought some joy from Jim.
That's right.
You know, we have to remind you the sun is shining today.
shining.
We have
Okay,
our
fine.
health. We have our
Okay, fine.
family. All is going to be
No, that's
okay.
my claim to fame. I was the death knell down there at UMass Dartmouth Law School. So, Attorney General Campbell, I thought that insulin was capped. I thought it was capped locally by the legislature costs and by Biden's prescription drug thing, $25 for certain name brand medications. But what is going on?
I'm yelling because I see my Uncle Benji. I'm like, what are you doing out
Are
here?
you her uncle?
There's Uncle Benji.
So don't put a camera on
Let's
him.
hear it for Uncle Benji right here.
He just walked in. I'm like, hey. So-
Wants to see you in action.
I know. I digress. No, this is a major case. So while there is, of course, even at the federal level, some capping, it doesn't involve every company. It doesn't involve every brand of drug. So this is still a major consumer protection case, and it is significant because I talked about housing earlier, but affordability, rising costs is a number one issue. That's why the president-elect, if he's going to help work with us on bringing down cost, I'll be there with him. If he's not, then we're going to be somewhere else doing this work. And my concern is that, frankly, we're going to have to step in even more to hold companies accountable on the consumer protection front because I think the federal government's going to walk away. So this lawsuit looks at these pharmacy benefit managers who are working with the manufacturers in this sort of pay-to-play to position their products on the list and, frankly, to raise costs for those who have diabetes or even those who are pre-diabetic. And we're talking about millions of residents here in Massachusetts. And at some point years ago, the cost of insulin, we were getting the numbers, at some point was maybe $2. And then skyrocketed. It's currently priced between $300 to $700. And that's not by accident, right? That the consumers are seeing this increase in cost, so much so that some are saying, I'm not even going to take my medication because I can't afford it. So this lawsuit, which also is done in other states have also done this, is looking to hold these PBMs as well as these manufacturers accountable for how they're coordinating to be able to manipulate prices and, most importantly, to increase them to the harm of those suffering from diabetes, sadly.
Pharmacy benefit managers? Is that-
PBMs.
Okay. Paul and Braintree, you're on with the Attorney General. I'm sorry, Marty, you about to say something?
We have a good text about homeowners
Paul, can you
insurance.
hold just 1 second?
Yeah,
and we'll get to you, I promise.
This is an anonymous texter who wants to know anything is done about the skyrocketing homeowners insurance affecting all homeowners in Massachusetts. Some of this person's friends, their bills have doubled. Is there any movement to apply something similar to a Proposition 2.5 to insurance companies that operate in the Commonwealth? I think this is just going to get
No
worse and worse
current
and
movement
worse.
on that legislative solution. Something could be explored. I think it's a reminder, the AG's office, my office and I and the team play a role in as a ratepayer for utility costs, auto insurance rates, all types of insurance rates. And when these proposals come in, we are inserting ourselves to make sure they're reasonable, given, yes, companies have to sometimes respond to inflation and other things that are raising their costs.
Well, the climate disasters all over the country, I think that, fortunately, is going to keep happening because,
So I
like all
understand
state,
that.
they're covering the floods, they're covering the hurricanes,
Yep.
they're covering the fires.
So I understand that, but at the end of the day, our job is to make sure they're still reasonable in terms of these increases. What we have found to be useful is folks that are experiencing an increase, even reaching out to the office on their particular case where we might be able to be helpful. I know this person was anonymous, but I
Yep.
would just say to folks who are experiencing an increase in cost by different types of companies, don't hesitate to reach out to our office because we might be able to help in ways they don't know yet.
By the way, the Hegseth hearing is just adjourning. I believe that the person sitting over his right shoulder throughout the whole hearing was his mother, who said he was the worst person who ever lived until he wasn't. We'll confirm that for you in a second.
We made a mistake
What's that?
about the place I got the honorary degree.
You didn't get it from UMass Dartmouth?
Apparently not. Apparently it was Southeastern School of Law.
They closed down when you got it
I
too?
guess they closed
Oh, they
down,
closed
too.
down too. Okay. Paul.
No, UMass Dartmouth did not.
Whatever.
So it
Oh,
shut
didn't?
down. Southeastern
Whoops.
No,
School
that's
of-
still very much open.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
just
Over
left
where your new house is.
I just left it alone because Jim was just so upset.
Such a bad mood, yeah.
Southeastern
Thank
School
you.
of Law. That's what I shut down.
Facts be
I
damned.
didn't mean to.
Paul and Braintree, you are next. You're on with the Attorney General. Thanks for your patience.
Hi, Jim,
Welcome.
Marjorie. It's
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Paul?
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Speak.
Go ahead.
Paul. We'll put Paul on hold.
What happened to
877. I
Paul?
don't know.
He
We just
disappeared.
lost him. We'll try him again in a second.
Sorry,
We're going to
Paul.
Jay in a car. Jay, welcome.
Hi there. I'm actually in Dartmouth now.
Oh.
Oh. Are you
Yeah,
in
I'm
front of
back
the
home
Attorney General's
myself.
house down there? Checking
Please
it out?
don't encourage that.
Go ahead. That's a good point. Go ahead, Jay.
Sorry.
I'm in my own
Okay,
house,
sorry.
but,
Sorry.
yeah. I'm calling specifically with a question regarding MCAD, the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. I think it was in the spring, lawyers for civil rights and the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts basically wrote a demand letter threatening a class action suit against MCAT for how backlogged it is. And MCAT said it was going to catch up, and they made a lot of promises again. And I mean, I myself, without getting specifics, have a complaint pending with MCAT. It's been 14 months, and you know, from what I've read online, because of the way that they're operating, it can take 5, 6 years, 10 years for anything to even get its way through to a decision.
Jay, I actually appreciate the call. That is an important agency. It is the agency that people go to when they experience discrimination, can file, of course, a complaint, and seek to get some accountability and justice for those who can't afford a lawyer. And so that backlog is real. This is something, of course, that the administration would have to work on. I will say, when I worked as a lawyer for Governor Deval Patrick, was involved with some push to try to address the backlog, even revamping who was appointed to the MCAT to make it such that you had really experienced people there. It still needs reform. We actually get cases from the MCAT. We have there is mandated referrals that come to our office, especially in the housing context. When it comes to discrimination, we are taking those cases all the time and making sure we have enough attorneys, including, for example, in our Civil Rights Division, to handle these cases. And we are doing our part. This is something that I, of course, would be delighted to work with the administration on, but reforms are still needed when it comes to the MCAT and the backlog. More investment, probably more human capital to address the backlog there. I agree.
Jay, thank you much for your call.
And it probably requires not only an administrative fix, but also maybe a legislative solution too. Who knows? But it definitely requires something to address the backlog.
Attorney General, the Globe did, I thought, rather extraordinary reporting on the oversight or lack of oversight by predecessor attorneys general and Governor Healy and Baker around the Stewart situation. When the governor was here last week, Marjorie asked her about it, and she said what she said to the Globe, which she thought the reporting was inaccurate, unfair, that she had done a thorough, I'm paraphrasing, but essentially a thorough job. Is there, and I asked her at the end, the Globe editorial board would said there should be an independent investigator look into this so we find out where the blame lay, in addition to obviously people like De La Torre and the people at Stewart. Is there a potential role for you in this? Should there be an independent investigation? Should the Attorney General's office look into how the Stewart mess happened and if the failure of some people in government to do their job was part of it? What's your role in this?
So we are actively still looking at Stewart. Obviously, that has not gone away. We are still, and I can't speak to the weeds or be in the weeds of an open investigation, but I've been on the record before when it was unfolding, talking about we will do our part to hold them accountable. That is ongoing. And then the second solution was a legislative solution, giving the office more tools to look at these transactions when they are happening, not after the fact. If I have to give the governor any credit, it is that some of those tools did not exist until maybe last week when the legislature passed a bill in terms of private equity when it comes to private equity in our healthcare system, like a Stewart, and of course she signed it. That gives us in the HPC significant tools to be able, for example, to look at a transaction as it is happening where you say, I want to sell the property of the hospital from underneath the hospital itself and give it to a private company that can increase the rents to some exorbitant rate and then charge the hospital back
Which
that
is what
rent.
happened at Stewart.
Exactly.
And the legislature precluded that going
So
forward, right?
I will just say, now that we have these additional tools, it allows for that, along with our accountability analysis, which is still ongoing.
Does accountability include elected officials or just the Stewart side of the equation?
The accountability is accountability. I can't speak anymore because it's open.
Okay. Paul and Braintree, you're back, I'm told. Welcome to the show. Thanks for sticking
Thank
to
you.
it. Hi.
I am back. Thank
Great.
you very much.
Sure.
During the recent Medicare enrollment review period, I called one of those incessant phone numbers and to check on my current Medicare position. It was a company called SelectQuote. They only gave me one option, which turned out to be Aetna. I asked them to send me or email me some information. Next thing I know, I'm getting tons of information that I've already been switched to Aetna without my approval. I had to go back to my original company. Oh, it was high. It was really high pressure. Well, why can't you make a decision today? Exact quote from the person I had from Select Quote. They didn't give me an option other than Aetna. It made me feel they were working only for this one company, Aetna, and I had no other option.
Paul,
Is this something within your purview?
well, actually, yes. We will find out once. We want to sort of have more details, who you talked to, when, and what was
Sure.
involved. But can you stay on, Paul, so we can get your contact information to follow up with you?
We'll
so
do that.
please stay on.
Terrific.
We'll certainly follow up with
We'll
you.
give your contact information. Please stay on. A producer will take it and give it to somebody in the Attorney General's office. You wrote Walmart after Walmart joined the growing list, sadly, at least in my opinion, and apparently yours, of major corporations that cared about DEI after George Floyd was killed and don't apparently care about it anymore because I'm guessing because they're scared of Donald Trump. Tell us what you did and how can, I mean, we know Costco is a holdout, but for the most part, there's either silence or retreat. How concerned are you about this?
Well, one, we should celebrate a Costco, and we should celebrate other companies that are leaning into DEI initiatives, not doing away with their initiatives, but supporting them because Costco and others get it, which is, and they're doing it against probably some fear and anxiety because of what's going to come from the federal administration. And they're doing it understanding the legal landscape as we do, which is no Supreme Court decision. There is nothing out there whatsoever that is standing in the way of companies promoting and utilizing and implementing DEI initiatives. And this idea that DEI is causing harm is such nonsense. It's BS. And I'm going to be crystal clear on it because there are some that maybe even suggest that I'm AG because I'm the DEI candidate. Please. I, worked hard to get to this position, went to Princeton undergrad with, no money, no deceased parents, you name it, went to law school, worked really hard, and then worked hard to get to this position, earning the vote of supporters. So this narrative out there around DEI misinformation, Costco and others are pushing back on, and so are we as AGs across the country to say we don't need another report. DEI initiatives raise the bottom line of a corporation. Crystal clear. Many have pointed to this. Also, when you have more diverse leadership and background and lived experience around a table and forming solutions, you get better solutions, you get greater creativity. Also, this is where I think my voice is most important, you also reduce the number of discrimination complaints, all the things that would come against your company because you don't have an inclusive work environment. This also helps with those risks as well, reducing your litigation risk in terms of discrimination or other anti-civil rights complaints. So these companies that are on the forefront and being courageous should be applauded. And so our letter to Walmart was, where are you? And this is good not only for the company, it's good for consumers, it's good legally, it is the best strategy. And at this point in time, if we want to make sure the new president-elect actually addresses the increase in costs, as he says he is going to do, we have to hold him accountable. And we have to say the dismantling of DEI does not do that. Let's work together on going after companies that are increasing, for example, the price of insulin. Let's go after companies or landlords that are manipulating the price of rents, not focus on other things because of misinformation that is out there.
Okay, we're out of time. Anything you want to say to Uncle Benny before you go over
Uncle
and see him?
Benji, hello.
Uncle Benji.
Happy New Year. He is. I think someone just bought him a coffee, or someone's talking to him.
They're doing something with him.
Okay.
But Happy New Year to everyone. Onward and upward. And Jim, I hope you feel a lot better at the
I
end
feel
of
better
the
than I did at the beginning. I feel fabulous
Very
now.
good.
Yeah.
But thank you to folks for calling
Thank
in
you
and being
all.
a part of this.
Yeah,
thank
we
you.
appreciate
And
it.
thank you,
Thanks
for
for having
coming.
me.
General Andrea Campbell, for coming in. We much appreciate your generosity. Thank you.